Hello, I'm Rico Cavella, and I want to welcome you to your Ageless Body Self-Care Guide. It's your operations manual for the human body and mind. Now, the topic of this session is healthy sleep. And this is such an important subject. I just recently Googled it, and it said that at least 68% of Americans are struggling with some kind of an issue of having to get better sleep. So I'm really excited about this topic because we're going to get some real clarity on what you really need to do and why it's so important to achieve a healthy amount of sleep. And this is so important for you to be able to live a long, healthy, and energetic and productive life. And as with all of our trainings, we want you to know that our bodies are meant to be healthy and long lasting, and that most of the common health challenges that most people are dealing with are not natural, and you do not have to accept them as normal. So our goal for this project is to offer you the latest cutting edge, proven scientific information and strategies that you can trust from some of the top experts in the world. And these are strategies that you can begin using immediately to take the very best possible care of that amazing gift you have, your physical body. So this is about creating your healthiest, most energetic, best functioning, long-lasting body as possible. So for this session, we're very fortunate to have as our expert Dr. Kirk Parsley. He's a former Navy SEAL and received his medical degree from Bethesda Uniformed Services, University of Health Sciences. He has been a member of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine since 2006, has served as Naval Special Warfare's expert on sleep medicine. In addition, he is certified in hormonal modulation, age management medicine. And after leaving the Navy, he went into concierge medicine and consulting. He continues to consult for multiple corporations and professional athletes and teams. And Dr. Parsley lectures worldwide on sleep, wellness, and hormonal optimization. So welcome, Dr. Parsley.
Well, thank you. I feel very welcome. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and thank you for coming here to share all your knowledge and wisdom with us. So let's get right into it. So my first question is, really, why is sleep so important for good health?
Well, and I'll give you a different answer now than I would have given you 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I haven't changed my beliefs as to why, but I've changed my beliefs on how to explain it to people. So I can get really scientific and geeky and nerdy and talk about very specific things. But I find the most helpful thing is, especially for a short form like this, is just to give somebody a concept to mull over in their brain and then help move towards the most important aspect of getting good sleep. And that is to value sleep. So if you think about it, we're the only animals on this entire planet that sleep deprive themselves on purpose, right? The only time any other animal will sleep deprive themselves is if they're being preyed upon. So, they're being stalked. So they're going to get as little sleep as possible to try to get away from the predator, or if they're starving, because if they're starving, they need to get up earlier and go to sleep later so that they can go farther to forage for food. It also leads to some neuronal changes and increased impulsivity and things that will help you stay alive. So if you just back up and start there and go, okay, every animal on this planet sleeps. Every animal on this planet uses the sun as its cue when to sleep and when to be awake. How is it possible that we aren't one of those animals? And of course we are. And so you're born into this contract. This contract basically says that it takes 8 hours to repair yourself, right? So when we're awake, while we're living, when we're doing things, while we're on this podcast, when I'm out exercising, whatever we're doing, we're actually using up resources. We are in what's called a catabolic state, or at best we're at equilibrium, but we're actually using stored resources and we're building up waste products, and those waste products have to be removed. And when we exercise and we do difficult things and we learn difficult things and we learn new skills and learn new concepts, all of these things are very highly energy dependent. And it's the simplest example is exercise. Most people know that when you exercise, like let's say lifting weights, you want to get stronger. So you do a certain exercise and you keep adding weight every time you can add weight so that you eventually can lift more weight, whatever your goal weight is. You aren't actually getting stronger while you're lifting the weight, right? You're actually getting weaker while you're lifting the weight because you're damaging your tissues, and those have to be repaired. Well, the contract that you signed at birth, before you know what a contract was, is that it takes 8 hours to repair. And so if you do more work than your body is capable of doing during the day, which means that you're pushing the envelope, you're pushing your limits, you're pushing your sort of metabolic storage. And if you're pushing that to get a little bit better, and 1/4 of 1,000th of 1% better, it doesn't matter. If you're going a little farther, you have to repair. You not only do you have to wash out all the waste products and then resupply all the stored nutrients, but you also have to repair damaged tissue. And in the brain, you have to actually form more durable neuronal tracts, and prune off other stuff that you've learned that's useless. And so there's a lot going on while you're asleep. But the basic premise is that sleep is the process of getting ready for tomorrow, right? It's what's built into you so that you can get up tomorrow and do a little bit more than what you did today, or at least as much as what you did today. So your body, in an ideal world, your body would completely repair 100%. It would fix everything that was damaged every night. And then you'd wake up, and the next day you would wake up completely restored. And if you did that every single night, you would never age, right? Because aging is basically the loss of the repair. Like, the less every time you don't quite repair, and then you go and do tomorrow anyway. Because if you don't get enough sleep, whether it's, there's just not enough time to repair what you've done during, to your body during that day, or you don't value sleep enough, or your schedule won't allow it and you're just not getting enough sleep, or you have poor quality sleep, and so it's fragmented and you aren't getting quality sleep, you aren't essentially getting enough sleep. In all those cases, it's the same thing. You're not getting enough sleep to prepare for tomorrow, but tomorrow still comes, and so you still have to do tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, how do you do tomorrow?
Yeah.
What do you use? Like there's no bank. Like, what's the bank? Well, the bank is your body. So then you start using your body as a fuel source to get you through tomorrow. And that's what we call catabolic. And catabolic is breaking down. It's taking complex structures and breaking them down into simple structures. And so, like, for example, we will use our muscles as a form of amino acid. If we're starving and we don't have enough amino acids, we'll actually eat our own muscles to supply the rest of our body with organs and brain and everything to get through the day. So there's nothing more important than sleep, and in fact, nothing else matters if you aren't sleeping well. If you deprive yourself of enough sleep, it is impossible to get better at anything. It's impossible to even stay steady state. And then if you're exercising on top of that, or you're really pushing yourself in any fashion after that, you're actually getting worse, right? So if it takes 8 hours to repair and you're only giving yourself 6 hours, we've lost 25% of your repair every night. So you're waking up in a deficit every single day. And that changes a lot of stuff. And we can go into those details if you want. But the concept really is that the importance of sleep is to get your brain and body ready to do tomorrow. And your brain and body use today as the foundation for figuring out what it needs to be better at tomorrow. So if you lift heavy weights and you want to get stronger, your body will preferentially make you stronger as it repairs. If you do endurance activity, it will change your cellular machinery and start increasing your ability to do more endurance activities. If learning is the same way. If your primary focus is your brain, the metabolics of your brain become sort of the important thing. But it's really repairing you and getting you better at anything you're ever going to get better at. Getting you ready for tomorrow, and then waking you up in the most optimal state that you can possibly be in for tomorrow.
That's so well said. That's the best explanation I've heard. That's so good, Dr. Bartley. And I really like that. It's about getting you ready for tomorrow. I've read studies that they've given people cognitive tests after they got like 7 hours, 6 hours, 5 hours. And if you don't get at least 7 hours sleep for every hour less, you don't perform very well on those cognitive tests. So your brain function goes down.
Well, it does. It goes down for a lot of reasons, but it's not just your brain function. They've done the same thing with strength, and they've done the same thing with endurance. They've done the same thing with emotional intelligence, communication. There's been a series I mean, hundreds of studies where they do what they call sleep adaptation, which means that they put you in a dark, cold, quiet room for 12 to 14 hours a night, with no alarm clock or anything like that, until you're just waking up after the same amount of sleep every single night. And on average, that turned out to be 8.2 hours, right? So 8 hours and 12 minutes. That's what it's average across probably thousands of studies at this point. If you just allow people to sleep, and you don't do anything that could wake them up, and then you just let them catch up on their sleep. Now, when you first start doing this, people sleep for like 12 hours. You put them in a cold, dark room. They have no idea what time it is. There's no stimulation. There's nothing to keep them awake. All they have is a bed. They lay in their bed and they sleep 12 hours a night. And then over the course of about 30 days, they get down to about 8 hours of sleep a night. And that's where, that's turned out to be sort of the optimal. And then now somebody's sleep adapted. And now that they're sleep adapted, you can test them on anything. Get them up in the morning and test them on anything. Doesn't matter. You can teach them something and test them. You can test them on something that's their proficiency. They could be professional athletes and you could test them on their professional sports. It doesn't matter. Test them on anything. And then let them go about their day, working and training, whatever, and then you can see if they're getting better the next day. But if you take away, we do what we call sleep restriction. You take away 2 hours of sleep. So instead of sleeping 8 hours, you only give them 6 hours of sleep. They come in the next morning, they test, and then they'll do worse. It doesn't matter what the test is. It could be juggling. It could be coordination, it could be problem solving. Doesn't matter. They'll do worse. They'll do worse than their baseline. And then you say, how do you think you did? And they'll say, I did worse. I was tired. I didn't get enough sleep last night. That happens for about 2 to 3 days. But by the fourth day, they say, I feel like I'm totally adapted to this. I feel totally normal. And I think I've done as well as I've ever done. And you can show them that, like, nope, you're still going down. Like it hasn't stopped. Like your performance is still decreasing, and they won't believe you, and they'll argue with you because, by definition, here's the hardest part about my job, right? My job is convincing people the importance of sleep. By definition, the sleep world, right? The world of sleep medicine, their definition of sleep is largely based on William Dement's. He's the godfather of sleep medicine. The definition is that there's a barrier between you and your environment, and you can be awakened. Now, I've added a third bit to that, not because I'm smarter than him, but just because technology is greater now. And so I see there has to be a barrier between your environment. You have to be able to be awakened, and you have to have predictable brainwave patterns, right? And then that's sleep. And so what we're saying there is that the barrier between you and your environment is when we think of the human brain, like when you think of the picture that you see with all the wrinkles, right? They're called sulci, all of these little folds and cracks in there, and that big, shaped brain. That is the neocortex, right? That's it. And then we have the lizard brain underneath that. So the neocortex is how we interact with the world, right? It involves our motor cortex, like our ability to act on the world. It also involves everything that we sense, our seeing, our smelling, our tasting, our hearing, all of that. And then even the cognition of like, what sort of sense are we making out of what we're sensing? Like, what does it mean when I see that orange, black, white stripe pattern running at me? Oh, that means danger. That's tiger, whatever. So like the meaning is even wrapped in there. So the barrier between you and your environment means that you are no longer paying attention to your environment, right? And this is really the foundation of sleep. It's this dumb. You just aren't paying attention to your environment. Your eyes still work. Your ears still work. Like everything still works, right? Nothing turns off. That's why somebody can be sleeping. You can flip on a light. Lights don't make any noise, unlike the movies, right? So you just turn on the light. It becomes a bright light in the room. They wake up. Why? Because their eyes are still working, right? You can stand next to them in a creepy way and they'll wake up because they're still working. Like their ears are still working. Their skin's still working. Like they can feel you just like if they were awake, right? So there's a shutdown of our brain where we quit paying attention to our environment and we quit interacting with the environment. And that is the foundation of sleep. Now, if I can't wake you up, there's some other reason you're not paying attention to the environment. Maybe you've taken drugs, maybe you're dead, maybe you've been knocked unconscious, maybe something worse is going on. But if you can't be awakened, then you're not asleep. And then the third thing is that when somebody goes to sleep, we can predict we can determine what stages of sleep they're in by a lot of things. But one of the most important things is the EEG. So we figure out what your brain is doing, like where are your brain waves traveling, which sort of directions, what lobes are more active than others. Excuse me. And are they fast waves or are they slow waves? Slow waves are deep sleep. Faster waves are moving towards REM sleep being the fastest. And so when your brain's no longer paying attention, we can measure your respiratory rate, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your pulse ox, like all sorts of things we can test during the night, including your brain waves. And we can say, oh, he's in stage 1, 2, 3, 4 sleep or REM sleep. And that's old nomenclature, but I still prefer to use it because it's more descriptive. Some people just say REM and non-REM now, but I still use all 4 stages.
Yeah, that was my next question was if you could talk a little bit about the circadian rhythms and really what is REM sleep and what's so important about getting REM sleep and what's important to do so you can get into the get enough REM sleep.
Right. So as I started this off with, right, every animal on this planet uses the sun as its cue to when to sleep and when to be awake. We're not an exception. So we have some ganglia in the back of our eyes that have nothing to do with vision, which is why blind people can have normal circadian rhythms, because they can still have these ganglia that sense the blue light. They aren't seeing blue light; they're just sensing blue light, right? So they're being activated by blue light, and then and what I mean by they're not seeing is that they're being activated. It's not part of the system that's traveling down your optic nerve to your occipital lobe and being imprinted and interpreted is that it's just sensing the absence or presence of blue light, most likely because the sky's blue. It's the most refractive light form, and so it's coming at you at all different angles, and it's really hard to avoid if the sun's up. So evolutionarily, humans, as you can imagine, I mean, you don't have to be any sort of anthropologist or historian to realize that humans were probably really terrible predators and really easy prey for just about every other animal. If you think about without a group of people around you, without a community and weapons and tools, like what animals could you actually outfight? Very few. I mean, I wouldn't fight a raccoon, to be honest.
No,
I mean,
raccoons are
that's
tough.
not a dangerous animal, but that's too, that's rough. And there's a lot of really dangerous animals out there for us. So it behooved us, based on our physiology and our capabilities, to be asleep during the nighttime, and so that's when we sleep. And if you look at hunter-gatherer tribes that still exist today, who've never been exposed to electricity, they live as close to our ancestors as we can imagine our ancestors would have lived, and they still spend their time foraging for food. Like that's what they do. They get up and they find food, and then they eat food, and then they lay around until they need more food, and they go to sleep at night, and that's kind of it, right? And there's no higher purpose. They're not building cities or spreadsheets or anything like that. They're just existing.
Yeah.
And if you look at these people, they've never seen electricity before. When the sun goes down, and these people have been studied, and there's a surprising number of tribes and communities that still live this way. Which when I first started reading the research, I wouldn't have thought this existed anywhere in the world, and it exists in dozens of places in the world. Yeah. But when you first start, when you research these people, and they put actigraphy on them, so they put like watches to measure how much they're moving and sleeping. Once the sun goes down, it takes about 3 hours, 3 to 3.5 hours before they fall asleep. And then they wake up right around the time the sun's coming up, maybe a little bit before, maybe a little bit later, depending on the season. All of them do it. 100% of them do it. And why is that? Because how can you really pay attention to your environment if you're a sight dominated animal and you've taken away your ability to see, right? And we are sight dominated animal, right? Like most 80% of the information we take in is through sight. So if you turn off our sight, what is there for us to do? Well, sleep, right?
Sure.
Replenish, restore, and get ready for tomorrow. And then when the sun's back up, we have our sight back, and we're a much more capable animal. So what happens is those ganglion, they sense light, they fire this pathway off. It's this long circuitous pathway. It goes through something called the SCN in the brain. It's not really important. It's the master clock, they call it. And then eventually it goes back to the pineal gland and starts the secretion of something called melatonin, which is a hormone most people have heard of. And all melatonin is like the initiator of the cascade. And it just starts everything going. It starts changing your physiology. And like I said, it takes 3 to 3.5 hours for your brain's physiology to change enough to feel like sleeping, right? Who in modern society, even if you're sleeping 8 hours a night, I'll bet you aren't spending 3 hours getting ready for bed, right? So we've drifted away from that. But the circadian rhythm is built into our body. So a male circadian rhythm is slightly longer than 24 hours. A female's is slightly shorter than 24 hours. So if you put a human like in a cave where they have no sense of the sun, and you put them way underground in some caves and you have artificial lighting in there, their circadian rhythm just drifts. And so, it's like it's off by 20 minutes or 30 minutes a night or something like that. And so, every 2 nights you're an hour off, and a week later, you're 4 to 5 hours, like, and within a couple of weeks, you're 180 degrees out of phase with the sun, and then you'll drift back around to being in phase with the sun. So, what we really use the sun for is to align us to the planet, right? Our bodies have its own circadian rhythm, but we use the light to make it make sense with when we should be awake and when we shouldn't be awake.
What I've read that a way that you can reset your circadian rhythms when you're really off is to see the sunset, the sunrise and the sunset every day for 2 weeks straight, and that helps to reset your circadian rhythms. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a very simple way of saying it, but yeah, I would agree 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, getting your circadian rhythms in alignment, and again, this is why I try to teach in a very simplistic manner. So, I like that, watching the sunset and watching the sun rise every day. But if you want to control your circadian rhythm, so like if you travel across multiple time zones, or if you work shift work or whatever, if you want to control your shift work, or if you want to control your circadian rhythm, it's really simple. Just think about what I just told you, is like how the brain knows when to be asleep. And let me add one bit to that, but think about how the brain knows when to be asleep and when to be awake. And you just try to reproduce that, right? So, for instance, if you are, let's say that you're waking up because you've traveled or because you have to work, you're waking up a lot earlier than you would ordinarily wake up if you're using the sun as your cue, right? Or if you're waking up a lot earlier. So what can you do to align your circadian rhythm? Well, put a bunch of bright light in your eyes, right? You can do this. They call it high lux lighting. There's like these light boxes. We use them for treatment for depression and stuff. You can mount them on your walls, and you have like this 30-degree angle, like the super bright light coming in, and that simulates you being out in the sunrise, right? And you do this. You can do this at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so what you're doing is you're now pushing your circadian, right? Here's my wake time, but I'm waking up here. Every morning I do that. I'm pushing this closer and closer, and to where now my circadian rhythm is aligned with, now my brain and my body think that when I'm waking up is sunrise. Now the reason for doing that is to be able to adjust for where you are, right? So the other things that you do is you stimulate the brain in ways that make it feel like it should be awake, and that's activities and light, right? If you are awake earlier than you need to be awake. Now, if you're having trouble say if you need to go to sleep a lot later, do the same thing. You convince your brain through light and activity closer to your bedtime than you ordinarily would. If you go out and do intense exercise, you put some really bright lights in your eyes, whatever, at 7 p.m. or something like that, and then it makes your brain feel like, oh, the sun's still way up, and like we shouldn't be asleep yet, and then it'll be easier to stay awake a little bit longer. And then you just do the exact opposite if you're trying to fall asleep. So you take away the light stimulation, right? And then it's the activity. So the other part, when I said I wanted to add one more part, so the light starts the melatonin, I told you, and then the melatonin shifts a lot of your physiology. One of the major things that shifts is the release of a neuropeptide called GABA, which is abbreviated GABA, capital GABA. And what GABA did, GABA aminobutyric acid, what it does is it slows down the neocortex, right? And what I told you earlier was that being asleep means that your neocortex isn't interacting with the environment. So you're making the neocortex less active. And then the melatonin has been triggered by the light, which has led to the GABA, but it's also changing a lot of other neurochemistry, right? There's a lot of neurotransmitters, a lot of chemicals that changes in your brain. You have a lot of neurotransmitters that are what we call wake promoting. We don't have any sleep promoting ones, really. We just have wake promoting, and then sleep promoting is the absence of the wake promoting ones. So the wake promoting neurotransmitters go away, and then the restorative ones, the regenerative ones, the ones that can go in there and clean the waste, help you clean out the waste product and restore the glycogen, or not glycogen store, but re-energize, let's say, your cells to get form the more durable pathway out of something that you've learned that day, like incorporate that into your long-term memory from your working memory, and maybe make some branches to other stuff that that's connected. Like that stuff is happening during the night. And that's all because there's a shift in your neurochemistry.
Wow. So I hope you're getting this, how important sleep is. And Dr. Parsley, you're explaining it so well and really giving some great example. I really appreciate that. So let's talk a little bit about the issues. What really are the main reasons that people are having all these sleep issues? I know there's stress and all these different things.
Well, I alluded to it earlier. And I've worked with, I wouldn't even hazard a guess. I've worked with a lot of people at this point to help them sleep. I find over and over again the number one cause of poor sleep is not understanding the value of sleep. If you make sleep your number one priority, you won't. 999 people out of 1,000 wouldn't need the help of someone like me, right? Another way to say that is, if I offered you, say, I'll give you, and you believed me, and I said, I'm going to give you $50 million if you can figure out a way to sleep 8 hours a night for 30 consecutive days. I think just about everybody on the planet would figure out a way, right? Like we'd all figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't need to call me to do it. You'd get on, get on the internet, you'd buy books, you'd listen to podcasts, you'd watch videos, you could figure it out. So if sleep is really important to you, it's very rare that people actually have sleep diseases. In medical terms, that it's rare. It of course does exist, and those people, may need pharmacological interventions. They may need lots of different treatments. But like I said, 999 people out of 1,000 will be just fine just by valuing sleep. Now, the one caveat to that is that the biggest hurdle in people getting good sleep is stress, as you alluded to. And it's just an increase in stress hormones. And it doesn't matter why they're increasing. It could be increasing because you are in a negative stress environment. You have a lot of demands on you, and you're overwhelmed, and you're just like burning the candle at both ends, and you're the hardworking Westerner, and you're trying to make more, do more, be more, and that's causing stress. It could be physiologic stress. You could be an athlete and you're working super hard. You could have a very physical job, right? It could just be you could be going through a divorce, you could be going through bankruptcy, you could be a lawsuit. Like there's all sorts of things that could be stressing you out. And all I mean by stress is that there's an increase in stress hormones. And the easiest one to talk about that most people know about is cortisol. So it's simple to just talk about cortisol. Well, the interesting thing about cortisol is if we're using this as the marker for stress response, do you know what we call the maximum cortisol, your maximum cortisol potential, the most amount of cortisol that you could ever dump out sort of at one time? Do you know what that point is called? It's called fight or flight.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Right? Most people have heard of this. It's fight or flight. What that means is that your body's stress system has said the most important thing, the only thing that matters, fight or flight, by definition, there's only one thing that can be mattering during fight or flight. So there's only one thing that matters. It's the tiger running at me. It's the guy with the gun. It's the car that's about to hit me, or the thing I'm about to hit with my car, whatever. There's something that is...
Yeah, life preservation, yeah.
Right. There's something that is posing a threat to your health or your life, significant threat to your health. And so 100% of your body's resources are going to make you better to be able to get out of that environment. And that's what we call fight or flight. Now, there's a lot of changes in your physiology, and you kind of become superhuman during the fight or flight period. The reason we don't run around in fight or flight all the time in the superhuman state is because we're actually catabolic. As I was saying earlier, you have shifted 100% of your fuel sources, 100% of your body's resources to being for your body and your senses in your body to be able to get you out of that environment. That's it. So nothing else matters. Your immune system doesn't matter. Reproduction doesn't matter. Digestion doesn't matter. Repairing, like none of that's happening because it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if you can fight off the infection if the tiger gets you. So the maximum amount of stress hormones, fight or flight. The minimum amount of stress hormones, the lowest your stress hormones will ever be, the lowest cortisol you will ever have at any point in a 24-hour cycle is during deep sleep. So deep sleep is the exact opposite. And the exact opposite things are happening if you think about it. Your brain and your senses in your body are pretty useless. You're not doing anything with them. You're just laying there. And all of the other stuff that wasn't happening is fight or flight. That's what we're concentrating on. That's really anabolic. We're rebuilding. We're producing anabolic hormones. We're producing, we're getting ready to reproduce, right? Our sex hormones are going up, all of the logical things, right? Digestion, fighting off infection, repair, all this stuff. So I told you can put people in a dark room for 14 hours a day, and eventually they'll sleep about 8 hours a day. And if you're not putting any light in there, what's waking them up, right? What's waking them up is cortisol, right? The stress hormones are necessary. So they're not negative. It's not a negative thing to say cortisol. Cortisol actually is the hormone that keeps you alert in proportion to your environment. So if you're in a stressful environment, if there's a lot of danger, you have really high.
Yeah, you need it.
Really high. And if you're in a kind of stress, then they're kind of high. And if you're not really stressed, then, again, this doesn't have to be something that you're perceiving as negative stress. It could just be that you're super, super busy. Now, bear with me. I'm getting to my point. So you're in deep sleep at the very beginning of the night. You have essentially, let's just call it 0 cortisol on our scale because it's the lowest you'll ever be. Fight or flight is maybe 10, right? That's like maximum cortisol. What happens from deep sleep over the course of the night, your cortisol starts creeping up. And at some point, well, let's just call it a level of 3. At a level of 3, that's enough stress hormone. That's enough cortisol to wake you up. And now you're not super awake. Like you wouldn't want to immediately wake up and, drive a race car or something right? You need to keep increasing that cortisol level, but there's a cortisol level that's sufficient to wake you up. So the problem is if you live at a high stress level, the only way you're going to be able to sleep is if you get your cortisol below that level that wakes you up, right? Because it has to drift down during the day. And at some point in the evening, it gets lower than the cortisol level that makes you wake up. And then that's when you're allowed to sleep. So if you run around with super high stress hormones all the day, you may actually never get that low. And then you have a lot of difficulty sleeping. The worst problem is when you don't sleep enough. As I told you earlier, when you cheat yourself on sleep, you still have to do tomorrow. How do you do that? I told you go catabolic, but you know what makes you catabolic is cortisol. So you start secreting stress hormones, and you have higher stress hormones if you don't sleep well. And then if your stress hormones are too high, you can't sleep. So then you don't sleep well and you get higher stress hormones the next day. So controlling stress is the answer. I just felt like it's important to say why.
No, that's
That controlling your overall stress state, and your overall stress hormone levels. And that can mean that you may have to decrease the amount of activities you do. You might have to meditate more. You might have to really focus on your breath. You might have, like, there's all sorts of things you can do to decrease stress. Myriad of gadgets and all sorts of education on that. But that's the biggest obstacle. And I actually have a PDF on my website that gives people a sort of protocol for how do you get rid of stress. If stress is what's keeping you awake, how do you get rid of the stress and sleep well?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I really like the way you explain things. It's really clear. I really appreciate it. Really, really good. So that kind of leads us to the last thing here is really, so what are your recommendations? What would be your most important, maybe 3 to 5 recommendations for improving sleep habits? I think we've already touched on some of those things, like, get rid of, the old thing about no more screens for at least a couple hours before you go to bed and all that sort of thing.
Right. So, interventions like that you usually refer to as sleep hygiene, and sleep hygiene can be broken down into an infinite number of an infinite number of actions that you could recommend. I like to explain it like this. Sleep hygiene is the bedtime protocol for a little kid, right? If you've ever been, like, if you ever had little kids and you've ever been in the position to have to put kids to sleep, or if you've ever been a little kid and you can remember this far back, you don't take a 2-year-old toddler that's roughhousing and just throw him in his bed and turn off the light and walk out of the room, right? Would that work? Like, everybody thinks that's the dumbest thing. If you said, I can't get my kid to sleep, I put him in his room and I turn on the light and he keeps coming out and screaming, everybody would be like, you moron, you have to get your kid ready for sleep, right? But somehow adults, we think, oh yeah, I can work on my computer until 9:59 and get in bed and be asleep by 10. Like, no, you can't. It doesn't work that way. You don't watch, Saw 7 and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and stuff and then flip it off and go to sleep. Like, that's not how you get ready for sleep.
Yeah.
So when you think about a little kid, what do? We say, okay, you need to quit all the rough play, right? Like, you need to start doing calm stuff. So put your toys away, and then you can, whatever, you can play, you can do your puzzle, or you can do these low intensity things, and you let your kids do that, and you let them unwind a little bit, and then you go run them a bath, right? You put them in the bath. And why do you give them a bath? Well, one, you're giving them a bath. It's a soothing environment, right? They haven't been out of the womb all that long. So this is, you're kind of soothing their nervous system, but you're also dropping their body temperature a little bit. And then you get them out of the bath and you put them in their comfy onesie, and you dump all the powder all over them. And why do you do that? Well, what you're doing is you're just decreasing the sensation to their skin. And what I told you, your brain has to quit paying attention, right? Ideally, you would be bringing the lights down, although I don't think that's as common as it used to be. And then you'll get them in a room. You get them in their room. You get in a nice, comfortable, safe place, right? You have to feel safe. If they have a lot of stress hormones, they don't feel safe. They're not going to be able to go to sleep. They have to be in a safe, warm, cozy environment with their teddy bear, their blanket, or whatever. And then you dim the lights to some degree, and then you read them a story. And you don't read them some super engaging, high-intensity story. You read them a story that they know. You read them a story that they've heard 1,000 times, and they want to be read a story that they've heard 1,000 times. This is why Dr. Seuss books are so good, because they have this rhythmic tone to them. And you start training their brain to kind of slow down and relax, and they already know what's coming. So they're just following along, and they're just kind of slowing down all their thoughts, and they're becoming more present. You've decreased the activity, you've decreased the light, you've made them feel safe and comfortable, you've dropped their body temperature a little bit, and then you can kiss them goodnight and walk out and turn off the lights completely, and they'll fall asleep. Well, how's that different than what our ancestors did, right? 2,000 years ago, the sun went down. Okay, maybe you had a fire, so you had some light, but you weren't going out and hunting. You weren't probably engaging in warfare. You were things like this. You were like you're sitting around the fire, maybe doing like some menial tasks, maybe eating some food, like who knows, telling some stories, depending on how far back we're talking. And then, you know, there's not as much to see. There's no environment to be interacting with. You're not doing super active things. Your brain's starting to slow down. The light's been out of your eyes for a long time. And now you go lay down. The temperature goes down when the sun goes down. Your body temperature starts to drop. You go lay down and you get comfortable and you fall asleep. And then your body temperature keeps dropping and all that. And then, you know, at some point your body temperature drops to its lowest point. That becomes a stressor. And then cortisol starts coming back up. And then you wake up around the time the sun comes up. So that is sleep hygiene. Recreate that, right? However you want to recreate that. There's a million variables to that. But you're basically taking the light out of your eyes and you're decreasing your interaction with the environment. That's it. That's why you can be dog tired after a day of work and be like, I just want to go home and go to sleep. And your friends talk you into going to happy hour, have some alcohol, which is a CNS depressant, should make you more tired. But an hour after there, you're like, man, I'm glad I didn't go home. I'm not sleepy at all. Why aren't you sleepy at all? You're stimulated. There's all sorts of stuff going around. Like, you know, there's attractive potential sexual mates around. There's funny stories with your buddies. There's televisions. There's loud music. Like, all of this stuff is going on. You're being active. You're being stimulated. And you can override your brain and body's desire to go to sleep. And you can do the same thing with bright lights, which is why people, you know, put the things on their computers. You know, like F-Lux will take all the blue light out of your computer at sundown. There's programs for your, you know, for your phones that do this. There's the blue blocking glasses that you can wear, that, you know, block blue light. And all of that is to try to simulate, you know, 3 hours of sundown before you try to go to bed. But that's really all there is to sleep hygiene. And it really is just think about what would have happened 2,000 years ago, or think about how you treat a 2-year-old trying to get them. And that's really what sleep hygiene is.
I love that. That's so good. So good, Dr. Parsons. I really appreciate that. That is so good. So I hope that all of our viewers and listeners really get that message. It's so simplistic. It's so easy. Isn't it true that really the most basic things for our health or for anything in our life are really simple, basic truths if we would just tune into that? So I really appreciate what you had to say there. I have one more question for you, Ned, but one more thing. I got myself a pair of blue blocker glasses because I do like to do some things on the computer at night, and you know, or even do some meditations and things. But they were red lenses, and so you just seen all red, right?
Mm.
So I mean that was uncomfortable. I don't want to look at a screen with all red.
Yeah, look into Swanwick.
Swanwick.
Swanwick. SWANCKIC.
Okay.
I think. They have a lot of different colored lenses. Yeah, they have some that are nearly transparent. It's really hard to tell.
That's what I want, because the red ones.
When I started lecturing on this, you know, whatever, 10 or 11 years ago at this point, you know, blue blocking glasses weren't a thing yet. Like, you know, that they weren't really on the market yet. So what I told people to do is go buy gaming glasses. So you go to like your GameStop or whatever. That's what gaming glasses are. Gaming glasses have like this argon coating on them, and they block the blue light, because the blue light, you know, is highly refractive and it's tiring on your eyes. And so you can look at a screen longer. And that's what now those aren't as good as a lot of the products that are out there now that are specifically designed to block blue light, but they block some. So the point being is that you definitely don't have to have like, you know, super amber lenses or something. It can be a pretty mild shade of yellow. And we usually share a booth with Swanwick, and I really like their products.
That's great.
They're good folks.
I'm going to check that out. Okay, before I let you go too, I've got to ask you this question, because I know you're a Navy SEAL, and you know, I've been a fitness person all my life, and that's what I teach. So I'm just curious. So tell us about what is your current exercise regimen that you do now?
Pre-COVID, during COVID, I pretty much always, I don't know. I kind of do variations of the same thing. I like to lift weights just because that works for my physiology. It makes me feel good. It keeps me lean. It keeps me strong. And I probably get a big endorphin rush doing that. I don't get endorphin rush doing aerobic activities. I live pretty close to the lake here in Austin, so I walk around that pretty much every morning, anywhere from like 3 to 5 mile walk or a bike ride or something like that. And then, lift weights a couple of days a week. Sometimes like in the winter when I'm not into walking, I'll lift 5 days a week or 6 days a week even. So it just kind of varies, but I mainly work out so that I can do other stuff, so that I can, whatever, I can go water ski with my friends or paddleboard or go play volleyball or go do jujitsu or whatever. So I have an active lifestyle, and pretty much my exercise per se is really just walking and lifting weights.
Yeah, that's about the same for me. I think the main thing is just to be consistent and just keep yourself fit enough to, like you said, so you're able to do whatever you really want to do as well as you need to do it. Yeah,
right.
That sounds really good. Okay, so the last thing is I always like to say is if you have any idea. So here's the thing, is that we have all this great information. So, but still, most people don't act on it. So knowledge is great, but without action, it's useless, right? So, what ideas do you have to motivate people to actually take action on all your recommendations that we just talked about?
Well, so that's difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
I work with people. I lecture to large groups, but I don't work with a lot of people as one-on-one because it's so time consuming. There's a lot of psychology involved, right? And the most important thing is that I figure out what motivates them. So like when people work with me, it's not about sleep per se. It's an overall health optimization program. Like it's all about performance. Like it's performance optimization with a health focus on it. And so whatever you value, I can show you how you will be better at that. You are more likely to reach any version of yourself, any future that you have envisioned for yourself. You're more likely to get there, and you're going to get there quicker if you sleep well. And I just put in the time to convince them of that. So if in the absence of someone like me helping you, what I would say is, write down some goals, right? Like prioritize goals. So what is the most important thing in the world to you? Like right now, like what's your number one thing? Like this, not like if this doesn't happen, everything else is flavorless. And I still might want it, but I won't get much joy out of it. If this, and you lay those out, what do you really want and what's really important to you? And then get your Google on, man. Just get on your computer and put in sleep and that, right? And it doesn't matter. It can be sleep and motherhood, sleep and communication, sleep and sex, sleep and money, sleep and athletic performance, weightlifting, whatever it is. And just go through and read the correlation. The people in the sleep sciences, we have the benefit of there really being no controversy in our field. There's all sorts of controversy about what's the best diet. Right. There's all sorts of controversy about what's the best way to exercise. There's all sorts of controversy about what's the best way to reduce stress. Should we be meditating? Should we be medicating? Should we be doing supplements? Should we do There's all sorts of arguments. There's no argument in sleep. Getting adequate sleep, getting optimal sleep. It's not 100%, but it is close enough to 100% to where you should act as though you need 8.2 hours every single night until proven otherwise, right? And so no matter what you want to do, figure out what you want to do, put sleep in that, figure out how sleep is correlated to that, motivate yourself. Think about the simple things I said. What do you do to a little kid? What would your ancestors have done? And then just start stacking it on from there. If you have problems with stress, go to my website, download the PDF on that. I don't even know how to find it, but if you mess around, it's not a very complex website. You'll be able to find it. And give yourself a 7-day trial. Everybody has 30-day, 60-day, 90-day trials. Like, do 7 days. If you can sleep perfectly for 7 days in a row, you'll never want to skimp on sleep again.
Yeah.
You just won't. You'll just be amazed. You'll sit up and be like, man, everything is so much better. the colors are literally brighter. Everything, like I enjoy everything more. Everything seems easier. I really, I enjoy my life much more in this state than when I do just missing that hour or two of sleep every night. And then you start to realize it. Like I said, once you chronically sleep deprive yourself, after about 4 days of chronic sleep deprivation, you know, if you miss 2 hours a night, after 4 days, you've convinced yourself that you feel normal. It's like being drunk, right? You have like one beer, you're aware that you've had a drink. You have 2 drinks, you're like, I probably shouldn't drive. You know, I need to wait at least a couple hours before I drive. 3 beers, well, you know, maybe I could drive. But then by 4, like, I'm fine. Like, yeah, 4 or 5 drinks, like, I'm fine, I can drive. And so it's just, you lose your self-awareness because your prefrontal cortex, we didn't talk about that one, but when you're in fight or flight, your prefrontal cortex is just like your executive functioning of your brain. It shuts off during fight or flight. So the closer you get to fight or flight, the more you're kind of diminishing your ability to use your prefrontal cortex, your executive function, your simulator, which says, hey, out of all the options in the world that I could act upon, all the things that I could do right now, what's the one thing that would most likely get me towards the goal that I'm after? And, you know, would this be a good idea? You don't have to do, like, we can simulate things. Like, you don't have to jump off the roof of your house to know that it will hurt to jump off the roof of your house. Like, you can simulate that in your brain. And so I forgot where I was going with that.
That's fun. No, that was so clear and so good. I'm totally in agreement and with that idea of just really thinking about what's really valuable and what's really important to you, and then realize how much sleep and all the things that we're talking about on this program, you know, how to get healthier, how much it's going to benefit you, and how it's going to really improve your overall life. So again, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Parsley. You're so clear, and I love your analogies. And so I want to remind everybody too that there's a PDF that comes along with this video and also a transcript of everything we said. And so in the PDF, you're going to have all the contact information of Dr. Parsley. If you want to get a hold of him to learn more about, you know, what he has to offer you, and if you need some coaching or some training, I know he has some great products to help you sleep. So you'll find all the information if you need more help and how he can help you if you're having any kind of a sleep issue. So you'll be able to contact him there. So once again, I just want to, both Dr. Parson and I want to urge you to take action on what you learned here. We know it'll make a big difference in your life, and it'll make your life a lot better. And the healthier you become, the better your life becomes, and everyone you touch, the better their life becomes as well. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Dr. Parsley. That was so good.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome. It's my pleasure.
My pleasure.